Good morning and welcome to the Return Homestead. My name is Mike and my wife Marty and I homestead 50 acres in southeastern Kentucky. Today we're picking up where we left off yesterday. We got the hole dug to repair this frost-free hydrant. Today it's time to take a look at the valve and see how we get it repaired. This promises to be an interesting day to be out digging and trying to repair a frost-free hydrant. It's raining. It's supposed to rain all day. Our high temperature for the day is 39 degrees. So this is definitely not for the faint of heart. But this is a frost-free hydrant that runs right on the corner of the barn. And this frost-free hydrant is connected to the main that supplies water down to the lower house. So while we don't necessarily need this hydrant functioning, we do need to be able to have it attached to the main without it leaking. Right now, if we want water down to the lower house, we're going to have to put up with this leaking while the water is turned on. And even with the rain, you can see that this hole fills up with water pretty quickly. So the water's currently off. That's one of the reasons the hole is not completely full of water today. And I'm going to finish digging this out and getting a look at how this is attached to the main. I'll have to do something about removing some of this water, or at least lowering the level of the water so that I can see what's going on. So I'm going to grab my shovel, get busy scooping this clay out of here. First order of business is to clear out as much of this mud and muck around this bucket as I can. And then hopefully that's going to draw the water level down far enough that I'll be able to see what's going on with the water main. So one of the hardest parts of working below grade, especially on water lines, is what do you do with all the water that's in the hole? Keep in mind, now, working on this water main right here, if I need to do any repairs to that, I'm going to need to have plenty of room, not only above that pipe, but below it. So typically when you're digging down to make a plumbing repair below grade, you're going to have to dig below the water line. You're going to need to be making repairs on that line, and having it half buried in the dirt is going to make that impossible. As you dig out further and further down, the water level will drop as the water seeks that lower level. And that's how you can uncover the valve at the bottom that is below water when you first dig it up. So we're going to keep going here. I'm almost down to a place where I can get a good look at this. I want to get some more of this clay out of the way so I'm not having to move it around by hand once I get in there. So we finally got down far enough that I'm below the water main now, so the water level has dropped significantly and I can now see the valve. Now of course I can't tell much about the valve right now. It's just a big muddy mess. In fact, if I don't keep the camera moving, you'd lose track of it here with all that mud down in the hole. So I do need to clean this off a bit. I think ideally I'm going to go ahead and try to disconnect this standpipe from the main, because once I've got it disconnected, I can pull it up into the barn, take it apart, and see what might be malfunctioning with it. It is possible that I might be able to reuse this frost-free, at least for another season, but the highest probability is I'm going to need to replace it. So I was finally able to get this out of the bottom of the hole, and all I needed was a small pipe wrench. This valve was connected to polybutyl pipe, which is not ideal for transporting water for your house. It's okay to use for irrigation, but it's not ideal for residential water supply. It's much too thin-walled, much too flexible. It is definitely much too flexible to be attached to this solid brass fitting and valve setup. If you have this sort of a fitting that is solid brass, it's extremely thick, very heavy, and requires pipe wrenches to even activate or use it, the idea of attaching that to polybutyl pipe is just crazy. And you can see that this is also not one of the more expensive of the frost freeze. So the metal that they use to make it is not holding up well below grade. I've been attempting to clean this joint up a little bit, try to get some of this rust off of it to see if there's any way to remove this valve body. So the way this works is the water comes through on the main. There's a valve in here that is activated by the handle at the top of the standpipe. So there's a lever inside of this pipe that goes down into this valve body and allows the valve to open up to allow water to come through. When the valve is closed so that water can't come into the pipe, this water loses pressure. And once it loses pressure, a diaphragm on the other side of the valve opens up and allows the water that is inside of this standpipe to slowly drain out 2 feet below grade. And that was the reasoning for the bucket of rocks that we found around this pipe. It provides a space around the standpipe where the water can run into. Not a bad idea putting that bucket of rocks around there, especially in heavy clay like we're in. That clay would certainly not allow this water to run out, but the bucket of rocks made that possible. So this is a functional item, even in our heavy clay, if we keep it surrounded by gravel. But for some reason, this valve handle is not fully actuating the valve down here at the bottom of the standpipe. So I'm never able to get the valve to close completely. It is always in a slightly open position. That leaves the standpipe full of water, and when it's 5 degrees outside, yes, that's going to freeze. And it did freeze, and because it froze, we ended up with a big split in the pipe. I might have been able to avoid this had I left the faucet dripping. But I did install this Y on there this summer so that I could attach more than one hose at a time. And that Y has 2 shut-off valves that were able to seal the water up inside of the standpipe instead of allowing it to run out. So the water comes out through that hole, and for the last 2 years since we moved here, it's been relatively functional. I say relatively because something has gone wrong with this handle so that it does not close the valve at the other end of the standpipe. So the valve has always stayed just a little bit open. We get a little trickle of water out of the faucet. But this last summer, I added this brass Y fitting. And that Y allows me to attach more than one hose at a time, which is very convenient. But it has shut-off valves on it that allowed me to trap the water inside of the standpipe. Now, if the water had stayed moving, if I had left those valves open on the Y, this split in the pipe probably would not have happened. I say that because it didn't happen in the last 2 years. And the only difference is that the faucet was leaking and had a nice big icicle hanging out of it in the last 2 years. So either way, we have a valve that won't operate correctly. I can't remove it from the standpipe. We have a split standpipe that there's no way to repair, or possibly a malfunctioning assembly up here, although all of this seems to function pretty much normally. So although the frost-free faucet seems to function normally from the top side, there's really nothing good going on below that blue handle. So I think it's time for a brand new frost-free installation. I'll need to pay particular attention to this brass fitting. So I'll want to either reuse this fitting or find one exactly like it so that it fits into that gap in the polybutyl. So I think we are on our way to Tractor Supply to see if we can acquire a new frost-free hydrant. Well, here we are at least a week later, and we still haven't gotten this faucet fixed. There have been weather conditions and timings where I didn't get home from work long before dark had set. So after dark, it's really hard to get out here and work behind this barn. There's not a lot of light back here. So when I get home from work after dark, it's really hard to finish up projects like this, but we finally have the right set of circumstances. We have the new faucet in place. I've got the fitting already attached to the bottom of the faucet, and we've got enough sunlight left today to get this job finished. So let's go get it installed. And here in the hole, everything is exactly as we left it. So the water main is still disconnected. There should be just enough room in between those two ends of the pipe that we can squeeze our fitting in and get this frost-free attached. Most of the water is dried up. It's still pretty muddy in the bottom of the hole, so I'll be trying to keep my feet out of that if at all possible. And we'll need to backfill underneath these two pipes. That block is probably going to have to come out of there. It's not ideally suited for its purpose. So I'm going to backfill this a little bit so that the bottom of my frost-free will line up with the main when I set it down in there. And I'm probably going to drive a T-post in here to help sturdy that up. It was a little bit loose being held by just the gravel in the bucket. So I'm going to add a T-post to the configuration so I get a nice tight faucet sticking out of the ground. So step one would be to get this block out of here. Now I do have to attach that fitting with these threads. They are brass. I want to try to keep all the sand and muck off of these brass fittings. So I'm going to clean these up a little bit, and then we'll cover them with duct tape before I start throwing mud into this hole. This is also going to help make sure that we don't end up with any dirt inside of the main either. Anytime you go and dig your main up, you're probably going to end up with a little bit of dirt inside of the line. You'll want to be sure and do a bit of a flush on your system. So we'll open up all the faucets downstairs in the other house and make sure we get all of the sediment and dirt out of the lines before we allow it to pressurize fully. And that'll also get the air out of the line as well, so we'll burp the lines when we get it reconnected. So we got those covered up. Let's get some mud back in the hole. So I've got the level of the dirt up about 3 or 4 inches from the bottom of that main. So now it's time to get that duct tape off of there, and let's attach those hoses to the bottom of that fitting. So as a homesteader, you're going to go out and buy a lot of equipment like this. You're going to bring it home. It's going to have a set of instructions with it. Those are the generic general instructions, and typically following those is going to get you a good clean install. But in the case of this frost-free hydrant, I noticed when we pulled the old one out that the whole bottom of the standpipe was completely rusted. And that corrosion hadn't infiltrated the pipe yet, but it was only a matter of time before it did. I think what happened when they put it in that bucket of gravel, all of that loose gravel scratched the finish coat off of the outside of the pipe, and that's what allowed it to start rusting. So while I don't necessarily want to try to protect the pipe from water, I do want to protect it from the rocks. And a good simple solution for that is just some duct tape around the bottom of the pipe. And again, we're not trying to keep water away from the pipe here with the duct tape. All I want to do is make sure it's protected from the gravel that's going to be in that bucket around the outside of the pipe. Now with the bottom of the pipe protected, we're ready to go ahead and connect this fitting to the main. Now, this may take some maneuvering to figure out how to make these connects. The only fitting that can really turn is the fitting that is attached to the end of the main here on either side. So this T-fitting on the bottom of the standpipe is what needs to connect, but it can't turn. So I almost forgot I wanted to get a T-post in here. So we got the T-post in. Now all we got to do is get this hydrant attached to the water lines. Looks like we're lined up fairly well here. Be kind to yourself when you install this stuff and you're choosing the pieces parts. This fitting has no bite on it whatsoever. It is not designed to be spun the way that I'm doing it right now. It's designed so that something can be spun onto it. So this is not an easy evolution to reconnect these threads and then rotate this fitting. It's got a flanged end that's shoved down inside of the polybutyl pipe, and then there's some hose clamps that hold that in place, which is secure enough, but working on this after it's installed, really hard to do. I mean, my only other option would be to cut this polybutyl pipe, rip off the little piece that's attached to the flanged end, and then add an extender to the pipe in order to reconnect it. And that's just not a good way to handle your water main. It's also not a good idea to use a pipe wrench or any kind of a wrench other than a crescent wrench on a brass fitting. But there's no place to attach to put a crescent wrench on this pipe, so kind of limited in the tools I can use. And that is definitely not the way to treat a brass fitting. But I have no option here. I am being careful to stay on the back side of the fitting. I am damaging some of the threads on this brass, but it's the very bottom threads that don't actually connect to the pipe anyway. So I'm not too worried about it. They won't make contact with the fitting, so. Kind of hoping that these threads are going to line themselves up. I can't really see what I'm doing down here in the bottom of the hole. Yeah, we got it lined up now. It's running up in there. All right, we're bottomed out in the fitting now. Excellent. Now you can see that T-post is going to do an excellent job of stabilizing this pipe, holding it in place. I will get a better system for tying this up, but for right now the duct tape will definitely do the job. Now that we have all this secure, I'm just going to make a quick review of the system, make sure that everything is functioning the way that it should be. So the handle is lifting the plunger, pushing it back down again. So we are able to operate the valve that's at the bottom of the pipe. We are connected again on both sides of the main. So we should be ready to test this thing. I'm going to go turn the water on and see if we've got this thing sealed up nice and tight.
Mike's getting ready to turn on the water. Let's hope there's no leaks. I hear water. I don't see it. That's a good thing.
Any leaks?
Not so far. But my eyes are bad, so you know how that goes.
Grab a bucket.
Okay. Is that heat tape around that?
No, it's just duct tape.
Hmm.
I wanted to protect it from the gravel. I'm sure that's why the other one got all rusted.
Yeah.
The gravel tore the finish coat off of the metal. Moment of truth. And there it comes out the bottom.
That's not good.
No, that's what's supposed to happen.
Oh, that's the bleeder valve thingy.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So you can see that bottom little spigot there allows all the water to drain out of this standpipe, and that's what keeps it from freezing. But I think that's also what caused the problem with the last one, is we got mud and muck up inside of there that prevented the valve from closing all the way. And unless the valve closes, this drain doesn't actually activate. So that was perfect.
Yay.
I've got water nowhere else except there. So we're solid.
Sweet.
Time to button this up.
Sweet. We get water down at the other house.
And we do need to get rocks and gravel around that valve. We want to make sure that that water that's streaming out has some place to go. And that's what the gravel is for. But the gravel is getting caught up in this clay, and it just kind of disappears into the clay. So I'm also going to add some sand, especially here at the very bottom of the standpipe. I want to make sure that the water has places to go down and away from the valve. And sand, unlike clay, will give the water a good path so that it can exit below like we want it to. Whereas the clay kind of traps stuff in place. Start with that little pile of sand. I do want to save a good bit of the sand for the top as well. So I want to cover the top of the gravel with sand once again to keep that clay from working its way down through the sand and possibly impacting the valve. And now I think we need to get that bucket back over the top of this. And there are specially designed boxes that will fit down over a pipe in a situation like this. And if you have access to those boxes, they're great. Go ahead and use them. If you don't, 5-gallon bucket serve the purpose just as well. In a perfect world, we'd be using a clean bag of gravel, or we take the time to wash this gravel. We just don't have the time to put into it right now. Now with all that gravel and sand in the bucket, the water will have plenty of room to escape, and we should be able to keep our frost free. Now we got to fill the hole back up. They do make some plastic boxes that can fit around the bottom of a frost-free hydrant like this one, but a 5-gallon bucket works just fine. And we got the gravel back in the bottom. I filled the top and bottom of the bucket with sand. There's sand underneath the valve, gravel around the valve, and then sand back on top. And hopefully that'll help keep that clay at bay and not allow it to clog up this valve. I'll get them. Thank you for joining us on the Return Homestead today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, would you please take a quick moment, just open that window up and go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You can hit that notification icon. That'll make sure you get notifications every time we put up a new video. And be sure to hit the thumbs up button while you're in there. That really does help with the algorithms to make sure they know you enjoyed the video, so they'll share it out with more people. We'll see you next time.